Prologue. Entering darkness. The only familiar sound is the faint dripping of water on rock. Water, which brings life, stopped harshly on the stone. A quick end to the hope such sound could bring. To find the water source seems impossible, even though it must be close. Once it's found, would it even be water? One could only hope. However, the guests of this land do not long for water. If they suddenly faltered on their mission, it would surely be their end. Three travelers appear through the shades and shadows coating the land. If there are trees or any plants around, they are not seen. The only visibility is the dirt road leading them deeper into the consuming darkness. The footsteps seem loud against the painful silence only broken by the occasional hopeless dripping that may be water. Of the travelers is a fiendkin, with silver ram horns curling around his head which he holds high, to keep his gaze on the path they were told to follow. His clothes are simple, besides the gaudy pocket watch hanging from his belt. It, along with his demonic tail, sway perfectly in time, with his steps like a metronome. Though his crystal blue eyes should be able to see further in the darkness, this is no ordinary darkness. He may as well be a human. The gifts from the loss of his soul seem like such a waste in this moment. Behind the fiendkin walks a young gnome girl, her red hair falling out of the braids that are messily done. Unlike the fiendkin, her steps are erratic. Her pace speeds and slows for no reason, beyond the giggles she occasionally lets out. The freckles and short stature could be deceiving if she tried, but there's no missing the chaotic creature shining in her sickly green eyes trying to break free from her little body. The little laughs and quiet whispers are almost like conversation, though she speaks to no one. The third traveler is even further behind the two. His long robes of amber and black lightly graze the ground as he walks. His human eyes never do well in darkness, but sight no longer guides him. He pushes his long black hair behind his ears as he opens a locket that hangs from his neck. He gazes at the image. The attractive man depicted has fair blue skin and weightless white hair, typical of air primordials. The traveler presses his lips to the image before closing it and tucking the locket under his robes. For the first time in miles, the travelers reach something in the darkness. No, not something, someone. The fiendkin stops abruptly, only barely stopping himself from running into the towering figure. The fiendkin is not considered small by most humanoids, but next to this man, he may as well be a halfling. This giant now steps towards the travelers from the darkness, his long black hair flowing down his pale skin adorned with swirling tattoos, reflecting the tribe he is from. This man is a Kalukatho Goliath, a strong, hardy race that lives within the mountains of the Old Kingdom, in the central peninsula of the Salamander Coast. His stature alone could strike fear into his foes, but even more intimidating was the black blade he carried on his back. The size suited him, but was as tall as the human traveler. His voice was harsh and deep.
Will you pay the toll?
The travelers knew they would be asked this. They were ready for this, weren't they? They had to be. The sound of water was long gone. The fiendkin took the pocket watch off his belt, though it never stopped swaying in time.
I pay his toll.
The fiendkin's voice was smooth like a song. While speaking those words, he handed over the watch to the Goliath. As it left the fiendkin's hand, the watch halted to a stop, now dangling lifelessly in the hands of the Goliath. The watch slowly evaporated in the Goliath's hands, and an essence of magic leaves the fiendkin. An emptiness replaces it within him, Blinking with surprise at the effect it had on him, the fiendkin steps to the Goliath's side, ready to continue the journey. The gnome staggers forward to the Goliath. She looks at his shins as her head slowly rises to look straight up where she finally looks him in the eye. She tilts her head to the side, and with a sinful squeal, she says, "I will pay his toll with Clementine." Suddenly, the sickly green color in her eyes washes away, revealing a natural blue color. Her demeanor turns to worry, and her voice quivers in fear. "Wait, all of me?" Then the green in her eyes rises, and the sinful giggles return. "Yes, all of it. I was nothing, but now..." She takes the vial of sickly green power from her pocket. "I made myself something. I made myself Merca, and I will give all of that rat to him." With a vicious giggle, she drinks the vial of poison and begins to convulse and scream in pain. She drops to her hands and knees and retches violently. Blood and bile coats the ground. This goes on until the gnome is empty of everything that was once inside her. The pools of fluid she lays in begin to absorb into the darkness surrounding all of them. As she rises to her feet, she is shaky at first, but each breath she grows stronger as that emptiness consumes her being. Her green eyes are piercing now, and her smile seems plastered to her face as she giggles, joining the Goliath at his side. Stepping forward, the human man hides his worry well. His hand, with no falter, reaches into his robes and pulls out his spellbook. The magic held in the pages is potent. The well-worn binding from the years of having its pages turned does not reflect the power held in its ink. "I will pay his toll." His voice is calm as he places the book in the hands of the Goliath. Unlike the watch from the fiendkin, the book's power remains after leaving the hands of the human wizard. The book, similarly, is consumed by the darkness, and the years of training and knowledge is replaced in the wizard with the emptiness that is consuming the other two travelers and the land all around them.
The toll has been paid. Follow me, acolytes.
The Goliath turns his back to the three and continues on into the void. Each step further felt like a lifetime. Barely able to see the person to the front of them as the darkness crept in closer and closer. Yet the Goliath knew the way, no longer needing the crutch of sight to guide him. The darkness welcomed him as an old friend. The shadows curiously crept along the new arrivals, studying them with anticipation. Despite the unease of this land, it was strangely welcoming. When the Goliath finally stopped, the shadow's grip parted, and in view the travelers finally saw their destination. A mountain with a peak taller than the clouds, towering before them. Carved into the mountainside was a fortress. From this distance, the inhabitants of this jagged stone stronghold almost looked like ants crawling through their colony. However, with the size of the keep and mountain, the inhabitants must be just as large as the Goliath guiding them, if not larger.
Your final test.
The Goliath's words still held the depth he spoke with when greeting them.
Infiltrate the Kalukatho Keep. Tell them you need to speak with their leader about Lorokan. That should get you where you need to be. That is all I will tell you. The void will guide you for the rest.
The acolytes did as they were told. The task was quite simple to start. Saying the name Lorokan to the frontline guards gave them the access they needed. Each Goliath in the keep had the same pale skin and similar tattoos to the Goliath that guided them here. These were his kin. The urgency the guards had once the acolytes explained they needed to speak with their leader regarding Lorokan expedited their mission. They passed through the grand halls with many busy Goliaths passing by. The keep was full of life and light. The grandeur was from the size of everything. From the tables and chairs, to the tapestries, to the light fixtures. But there was a simplicity to everything as well. It was all made from the stone of the mountain. Nothing was wasted. Everything had its purpose, to serve the life in this keep. It was also full of light. Each lamp burned incredibly bright beyond magical means. The golden flame seemed offensive now to the acolytes. A yearning for the comfort of their darkness washed over them. Only being able to take so much in as the guards hastily rushed the acolytes into the throne room, pushing open the heavy stone doors. The room was just as grand as the rest of the keep, but maintained practically as well. The King of the Kalukatho sat on a stone throne with a large brazier above it, lit with the golden flame the acolytes had noticed before. The king was speaking with his council. When they arrived, a sudden hush fell over the room as they entered, led by the guards.
My lord, these travelers have come with news of Lorokan. There is still hope.
The young Goliath guard announced with a smile and a sigh of relief. The king slowly stood from his seat.
Thank the light. Please come in. We have much to discuss.
The acolytes approached the king. A question crossed their mind. What were they doing? They know nothing of this Lorokan. The tiefling was the first to take initiative.
Indeed. My name is Mezenkelnos, and these are my traveling companions.
His confident facade did not falter as he gestured to the two acolytes with him. Though the exchange of names was unnecessary, it did buy them time to think.
My name is no longer necessary. I'm now known as the Architect,
the human wizard says, joining the side of Mezenkelnos. The two turned to the gnome that called herself Mirka earlier. While her fist clenching and unclenching, she walked up beside them. She stifled her giggle, but not her smile. Her hands were clenched so tight the blood began to squeeze from between her fingers. Mezenkelnos opened his mouth to say something, anything to explain Mirka's behavior, but before he spoke, the emptiness that was inside the three arose. The presence now unignorable. Time slowed all around them, and his voice filled their minds.
Go on. Trust me. Kill him. Snuff out the light. Do not fear them. Through me, all will be well again.
Like a blow on the last candle, the shift happened. The three of their eyes darkened. Mezenkelnos lifted his hands at the Goliaths. What are you? Before the king could finish, Mezenkelnos cocked his head to the left, and in an instant all of the Goliaths froze in place. Mirka, with blood still dripping from her palm, removed her sword from its scabbard and smeared the crimson down the curved steel blade. As she stalked towards the paralyzed Goliaths, giggling with glee, the blood shifted from a dripping liquid to a crackling lightning coating the blade's edge. She began slicing through each of them. Each slash is chaotic and vicious. The cuts were quick, but the killing was slow. As a guard nears the threshold of the throne room, the horrifying images that unfold before his eyes silences him. The words that escape his lips are cracked and broken.
Light, forsake us.
His call was met with the thunder of boots. His kin, the Goliath, surging forward, each step a drumbeat heralding valor in the face of the shadow. The architect unfurled his wand from the depths of his robe. With eyes shut, he inhaled the metallic tang of the blood that now permeated the air. The cries of the Goliaths crescendoed, a cacophony of impending doom. In a singular motion thick with anticipation of death, the architect channeled the magic from his wand, casting forth a tendril of lightning. It struck a young woman first, her scream cut short as the bolt claimed her life and leapt to the next victim. And then the next. The lethal dance of lightning was relentless, a macabre display of power that left charred flesh and twitching remains where once stood the king's proud guard. As the shadow consumed the light above the king's head, he stared in abject horror, his faith crumbling like the ashes of an extinguished flame. Mezenkelnos' laughter, a sound both cold and devoid of humanity, filled the chamber, as if the king's whispered prayers to the light fell on deaf ears. Light cannot save you now. You belong to the shadow, my king. Mezenkelnos taunted, reveling in the dread that gripped his once noble heart. Then, a cruel mimicry of mercy, tendrils of shadow thick as pitch began to weep from the brazier, descending like a judgment. Each viscous drop seared the flesh of the king's face, peeling away his visage with the agony of molten iron. His cries add to the cacophony of violence in the throne room, each plea for an end, for release, a symphony to the ears of his tormentor. Mezenkelnos, with a smile as dark as the void itself, whispered, "Give your soul to the void, and relief shall be yours. Surrender to him, and I promise you, the pain will cease." The king, amidst the slaughter of his kin, by the lashes of lightning and the blood-drenched blade, beheld another shadowy tendril fall, rotting his flesh down to the bone.
I give myself to him. Just please, let my people live,
he begged, the shadow creeping into his eyes and mouth, a vile sacrament for the great lord of the dark. Mezenkelnos' knowing gaze followed the shadows as they claimed the sacred halls of Kalukatho, understanding that no mercy would be afforded to the king's kin. Such concerns were beneath him now. The king's mind was already awash with the encroaching darkness. A deep rumble from the earth itself acknowledged the ascension of evil's might. The acolytes felt the shadow's embrace, an affirmation of their dark patron's pride. With it came gifts, dark and terrible in their power, sealing the fate of the kingdom under the exonerable tide of the void. Silence usurped the throne room, a silence so profound that even the echoes of death seemed to cower. The three acolytes found themselves ensnared in the oppressive void, sight and sound stripped away, leaving them adrift in the expanse of nothingness. Panic clawed at their minds, but it was a fleeting torment, soon extinguished. Surrendering to the void within and without, they embraced the darkness, the very essence of the void they served. In this moment of macabre unity, they were reborn, not as mere harbingers of doom, but as the sovereigns of the end itself. Their cruelty and malice were not simply shown, but celebrated, a rite of passage into a new, merciless existence.
Excellent. My favor rests upon you. Embrace your destiny, my chosen.
The words, though not spoken, filled their very essence, resonating in a place deeper than sound could reach. The veil of darkness lifted, The three stood upon a desolate plateau, adrift in a vast expanse of nothingness. Before them lay a labyrinth of stairs and paths, each leading to unknown fates, and in front of them, a semicircle of 8 pedestals stood. 5 figures occupied these thrones of power. A drow woman adorned in spider silk, elegant and terrible. A marksman bearing the snarl of a wolf, eyes obscured yet vision unclouded. An enigma cloaked, and their face shielded by an actor's mask. An earth primordial, her form a tapestry of decay and rot. And the Goliath, their stoic guide to the now ruined keep. Mirka, Mezenkelnos, and the architect, drawn as if by ancient instinct, ascended their appointed pedestals, completing the circle of the void's chosen. A tremor of anticipation passed through the void as they took their place among the others. A vision seared itself into their consciousness. A high elf of golden skin and hair, with eyes of deep, dark purple hue, robed in the splendor of gold and white. This was their quarry. All 8 of the chosen would be sent to hunt him. The voice of the void, a presence that transcended sound, enveloped them in an eldritch embrace.
The war upon the light commences. This reality will be extinguished until naught but the shadow remains.
As the declaration echoed in the Ashen Realm, the Chosen felt the gravity of their purpose. They were the harbingers, the sovereigns, the enders of days, and with the void's benediction, they would unmake the world. Chapter 1. Tempered Fates. The sun beat down on the Water's Wake forge where Powassa Anoa toiled beside his father. The heat from the blazing forge was a fierce rival to the sun's own. Most of the space seemed unremarkable, from the meager walls and furniture, even down to the material being shaped and crafted. However, their forge was an unorthodox one. Instead of just hammer and anvil, they utilized the family's secret technique, magically enchanted high-pressure water to hone the weapons to a deadly sharpness and reinforce the armor. But the art was fading, lost in the mists of his father's memories. Poe's father was a victim of a creeping and all-encompassing memory loss. Each piece that Poe's father attempted to finish turned out less than perfect, reflecting the struggle to keep their own livelihood afloat. Powassa was a handsome young water primordial. He took a cloth and wiped the soot from his face, revealing a sea-green skin tone. Taking a breath, he ran his hands through his aqua hair that flowed like waves. He was growing it out from a very short length that he used to keep it. Now the inches lay only just past his ears. Quickly, he went back to assisting his father, a much older water primordial whose aqua skin and hair had darkened like when a lake fills with algae plumes. "Steady now, Dad," Poe murmured, guiding his father's hands as they shaped the heated metal, trying to compensate for his father's faltering skills. The weight of their future pressed down on him, but he bore it with patience. Patience of a son who loved his father more than the craft itself. The shield wasn't shaping well, though. They needed supplies, materials that would not forgive the technique's failing precision. Poe stepped back from the forge, removing his apron, and he donned his favorite plate armor. Not usually required for a shopping trip, but he was proud of their work, and never failed the opportunity to show it off. His father looked up. Momentary clarity.
"You'll be back soon?"
he asked, his voice tinged with the edge of confusion that so often clouded his thoughts. "I will," Poe promised, a reassuring smile on his lips. And Aunt Warner will be here for dinner, remember? I just need to pick up a few things, okay? With a few coins in his pouch, Poe stepped into the village, passing the closely packed houses of Water's Wake. The scent of baked goods hit his nose as he passed a cart filled with loaves and delicious pastries. The baker, however, was arguing with a young blonde girl.
Don't take the goods before paying, girl.
The baker snarled at her. I swear, I had the money for it. I didn't notice my pockets were empty. She spoke without looking in his eyes, only his general direction. As Poe moved closer, a pale sheen covered her eyes. The poor girl was blind. He had seen her around before and knew her name was Cecily, but somehow didn't realize she was blind. What tragedy caused those eyes to lose something so essential? The baker snatched the bread out of her hands and turned away. As the girl stumbled back, Poe placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Hey, I don't have much, but I should be able to get you that loaf. Cecily put her hand over her heart and looked in the general direction of his chin. Really? Oh, thank you. Poe pulled out his small pouch, ready to approach the baker, when suddenly Cecily snatched the bag and took off running down the tight, busy street. Hey! Stop! He bellowed, the frustration and urgency clear in his voice. She dashed off with Poe in pursuit, his heavy heart with the thought of his ailing father waiting back at the forge. The chase led them through the bustling village, and finally, as he caught up to her, it was too late for him to realize that she had halted at the edge of the water at the docks. He tried to slow, but he didn't know his own strength yet, and crashed right into her, sending them both flying into the lake. The town was in the middle of a lake with only one entrance and exit. Everywhere else led right to the water. As Poe sank, he saw many fish dart away from the docks. His half-plate kept him going down, but the water was his friend. Like a creature from the sea, he swam up with ease toward Cecily, who was now hanging off the docks. Once, reaching the surface, he saw her trying to part her long hair now clinging to her fair skin. Soaking and spluttering, Poe demanded, "Give me my money back." By the light, you owe me at this point. You're lucky I can swim. She splashed the water in his face in an attempt to push him away, but it didn't work. Why did you act like you were blind? I thought you needed that money. Of course, someone like you would think only the blind are in need of help. I never said... Suddenly, the two were swiftly yanked out of the lake by the town guard. They slumped on the dock, clothes sopping wet. The two guards looked down at them. Quickly, Poe tried to explain, "Thank you so much. I was just trying to..." "Save it, kid. You're both under arrest," the high elf guard spoke with disappointment in her voice. Both of us? But she stole my money, Powassa pleaded. He gave me his money, Cecily shot back. The male dragonkin guard rolled his eyes.
Whatever petty feud this is has nothing to do with your arrest. You both disturb the waters where the fishermen catch. There are signs all over stating no swimming. No fish means no sales. No sales means no profits, and no profits means the city's tax is not paid. You two have ruined the lives of all the fishermen's families today over one fight.
Money was everything here in Bella Clara, and getting in the way of anyone making money was most certainly a crime. Powassa lowered his head in shame. Cecily crossed her arms. Why should I care? The investors never seemed to send the money back to the people who need it anyway. The guard placed handcuffs on the two of them when the high elf spoke. That's why you should care. This was a long time coming, though, wasn't it, Cecily? Poe noticed her eyes grew wide from the words the guard spoke. Uncharacteristically, she kept her mouth shut as the guards led them out of Water's Wake. They passed through the little town whose quaint charm was in opposition to the view of two teenagers being arrested. At least, this side was. Poe had always known there was a darker side of Water's Wake, but he chose not to dwell on it. He had heard whispers and rumors, sure, but his focus remained steadfast on the forge and caring for his father. He avoided the seedy corners and the troubles that seemed to cling to them like algae on the underside of boats. As they were led across the bridge, the familiar creak of planks beneath his feet felt like the closing of a door. He glanced back at the town, its charm now overshadowed by the stark reality of his situation. Summersrest, Bianka, the Old Kingdom. To Powassa, these were distant lands, mere names he had heard in passing tales, never places he expected to see, especially not like this. He harbored no fantasies of venturing out for glory. His life was firmly rooted in the daily rhythm of the forge and the tender care of his father. The heroes of the current age, the wardens of Afera, were figures of grand stories, combating darkness with weapons that Powassa longed to forge. Yet deep down, he knew his place was here, with his father, whose needs ranged from assistance in paying dues to the investors, to the simple act of recalling the unique steps of the Anoa forge technique. Adventure, the kind spoke of in hushed, awed tones by travelers, had never truly been an option. Powassa's reality was one of responsibility and quiet sacrifice, and he had made his peace with that. Home was where he needed to be, and despite the occasional daydream, he cherished it. But as he was led away from the familiar sights and sounds, he couldn't help but question whether the home he held dear was merely a comfort or a cage from which he never knew he longed to escape. The cart awaited, flanked by guards whose tabards bore a symbol of Summersrest, 2 triangles with an eye in the center. It was a stark contrast to the simple fishing emblem of Water's Wake that he had come to associate with safety and community. Powassa gulped, then quietly said to Cecily, "They're from Summersrest. I think that's the prison they're taking us to." That's far from here, right?" she asked. "Just a 2-day journey, but how are we going to get back home?" "I'm not. Just out," she huffed. They were ushered into the cart, already occupied by a young bronze dragonkin and a high elf clad in dark robes. The Summersrest guards didn't waste time, promptly setting off and leaving the Water's Wake guards, and the town, behind. Powassa watched as the place he called home shrank in the distance, its familiar silhouette dwarfed by the encompassing mountains. The journey through the pass was smooth, yet within him there was turmoil. With a heavy heart, Poe turned his attention to the dragonkin across from him. The creature's presence was unremarkable, clad in modest leather armor with cloth-wrapped talons hinting at a readiness for conflict. Yet the dragonkin's slender and slight frame seemed ill-suited for the brawls his hands suggested. His golden eyes lifted to meet Cecily's inquisitive stare. Are you staring or blind?" he asked. "She's not blind. Learned that the hard way today," Poe snapped. "Give it a rest already, would ya?" Cecily sighed. "I think the coin could get us both back to Water's Wake once for free. Let's just try and work together, all right?" Powassa offered. "Work with you? The goody-good son of Water's Wake's worst blacksmith? No way. You gave me this coin, so I'll use it how I please," she smirked at him. Powassa felt himself tense and fill with anger. "It's not my dad's fault." He took a moment to breathe and relaxed his hands and jaw. "You know very well that I did not simply give you that coin. You lied." "Aw, this is so cute. Do you two always bicker like this?" The dragonkin playfully smiled at the pair. "Huh? Ew, what are you implying?" Cecily rolled her eyes. "Gods, you are both so dumb." The dragonkin simply showed the bag of coins that was now in his possession. "How did you... Yeah, what?" Powassa tried to reach for the bag, and the dragonkin moved it just out of his reach. "Maybe don't talk about the coin you carry around, criminals. Name's Desmond O'Malley. You may have heard of me." Dragonkin was almost reclining on the cart bench, and he He probably would have if the high elf wasn't sitting next to him. I have not. I don't travel much. I'm Powasa Anoa, and that is my coin. If you would please return it. Powasa lunged again for the bag to no avail. You really don't get how this works, do you? Desmond said. His scaly forehead wrinkled as if to raise an eyebrow, even though there was none there. He really doesn't, Cecily agreed. My father and I don't have coins to spare. So please, give that back, Powasa pleaded. Spare enough coin to give to a blind girl? Cecily rolled her eyes again. I didn't give you spare coin. I needed it. I was willing to sacrifice my needs for you, but you tricked me. Powasa caught a flicker of guilt on Cecily's face. Brief, but telling. It seemed rare in Bella Clara to see such a look, especially from someone who'd just taken advantage of another's kindness. Desmond sighed and handed Poe the little bag. Here, I steal from those who have too much. Not that we'll have much of an opportunity for a while. How'd you know so much? You aren't any older looking than us. Cecily raised an eyebrow. I don't. I know a lot about a little. I haven't traveled much either. I don't even think I've been to Summersrest. Desmond looked down at the gold ring on his left hand with the red gem in the center. Looking closely, it almost seemed like the gem glowed with life. What do you mean you don't think you've been? You either have or you haven't, Cecily pressed. Nothing. Desmond then looked for a way out of this topic and turned to the hooded high elf to his left and said, What's your deal anyway? The elf didn't look his way, though. Didn't even react to the three of them. Hello? It's rude to ignore people, Cecily sneered at him, but the elf still didn't react. Drop it, Cecily, Poe said nervously. Powasa leaned his head against the rough wood of the cart, the clink of chains, a grim reminder of his predicament. His thoughts were of his father, alone now, likely lost in a fog of confusion without him there to guide and reassure. A surge of worry gnawed at him. But amidst the fear, a tiny spark of curiosity flickered to life. He was leaving home, embarking on an unintended journey. Could this be the start of something more? Like the tales of Alex Silverfoot he'd read about? Those stories always began with trials, leading to a path of greatness with the wardens of Afera. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of his story, not the end. He glanced at the horizon, the expanse of sky meeting land, and for a moment, he allowed himself to wonder. Chapter 2. The Shadow's Claim. Incense slowly rises from the bowls on either side of the modest wooden coffin. The Church of the Five Divines is never the busiest on funeral days, but those are the busiest days for the wings dedicated to the Mother. She wasn't the most popular deity given her reign of death and leading souls to their afterlife. It caused most people to feel conflicted when they inevitably have to face her when she takes their loved ones from them. Above the crowd of mourners in the rafters looking down on the ceremony is Bianka, a young fiendkin woman. Her skin is an iris purple color and her hair is darker of a similar shade. The two horns that grow from her forehead arc back before they swoop back up into a point. The half-elf shape of her ears and burgundy eyes are more reminiscent of a drow heritage. They allude to what she could have been if she owned her own soul. Patrons know she lives in the steeple of the temple. She actually runs an apothecary from the second level. A convenient exchange worked in both the temples and her favor. Bella Clara is an expensive place to live. Her rent helps pay for the temple's upkeep and possibly any extra needs, as the tax money that actually ends up going to the temple is a pitiful amount. Donations are far and few in between, where most patrons can barely keep food on the table as is. Moving to Summersrest, Bianca found that she didn't have many options. It's not uncommon to run into prejudice against fiendkins, and it gets worse the further south in Bella Clara near the Old Kingdom. She grew up in Belka, the capital city, so there was more diversity despite some occasional bigotry. Here, however, despite the trade hub the city is known to be, the locals tend to believe the rumors they hear. She never really felt like she belonged in Belka, and moving to Summersrest didn't quite fix that, but she was able to make something that was her own. The apothecary was successful, and the locals grew to know her well. Still, she hid away, watching the worshippers. Mostly the ones of the Mother, the fairy woman of souls. Fiendkins don't own their own souls. Most were owned by Asmodeus, the Lord of the Nine Hells. She didn't know who owned hers, though. Her parents didn't know much of it either. Knowing so little made her obsessed. Her tail swayed as she balanced on the beams, walking back to the solid flooring, holding her apothecary. The funeral was ending, and the final hymn echoed throughout the temple. Not much of a singer herself, but she enjoyed this one. Most of the funeral hymns were her favorites. She hummed the tune as she climbed the ladder leading up the tower. The space is tight and packed with tons of books. Some were for enjoyment, but the majority were nonfiction. Quite a few were on demons and devils, what they were like, their history, how to kill them. Grabbing one from her shelves, she slouched into a chair and began to read. At her bedside, in the loft above where she sat, were a simple longbow and short sword. She needed protection ever since she was little. Her dad taught her how to fight. He and her mom couldn't always be there to protect her, or even their good friend Ajax, who protected her a few times in Belka. Purple fiendkins were quite rare, so shady traders saw an opportunity in collecting their horns. It was more of a worry when she was little, though. Now most people fear her first, then actually get to know her. Breaking her from her book was a knock at the entrance to her apothecary. It wasn't unusual for regulars to sometimes show up when they needed something after hours. In fact, she was expecting a pickup today from one of the lead investors of Summersrest, Rose Fisher. Between her and her brother, they almost owned all of the businesses in town. She set her book in her chair and quickly slid down the ladder, looking down at herself, double-checking that she was still presentable for a guest. She wiped off the smudge of the sleeve of her loose top that was tucked into her simple brown leather pants. She didn't bother putting on her knee-high boots as she was suspecting a friend to be at the door. As she opened it, standing there was a familiar yet new face. "Oh, Rolius, what can I do for you?" The green fiendkin woman smiled at her. She wore her usual billowing attire typical of Odaran natives. The bag around her shoulder looked heavy, but the fiendkin didn't let the weight affect her. "Sorry to stop by after hours. I wanted to bring you something that pertains to the last conversation we had." Rolius is a nomad that traveled to Summersrest a month ago, and being a rare color of fiendkin as well, had a bit of trouble fitting in. Bianca and her connected right away. Their relationship progressed quickly, and Rolius confided in Bianca quite a lot the last time they saw each other. The conversation kept Bianca up at night, and she found herself roaming around the mother's wing, more and more contemplating who held her soul. "Really? Well, Bianca was incredibly curious, but also knew what kind of door she could open by pursuing this further with Rolius. "Just let me in and we can talk about it all. No harm in that, right?" Bianca pursed her lips, and after a brief moment, "Of course. Come in. I'll make us some tea." "I've been thinking a lot about what you said before. I want my soul. I've never sat well knowing it was a devil's before I even existed. I know some fiendkin live long, happy, normal lives without caring. I can't, though." Bianca looked into her half-drunk cup of tea. Rolius reached her hand across the table to grab Bianca's.
Because you're like me. We are not like most of our kind. But not only to find the devil that owns it, we have to kill them? There's no other way. Demons and devils collect souls like dragons hoard gold. That does make sense with everything I've learned in my studies, but we're just two fiendkin. Against our devils, we're nothing. I have the answer to that too, my dear. Rolius let go of her hand and reached into the bag, pulling out a leather-bound book. It was ancient-looking, and the cover held no title or indication of what it was. Take a look, as she passed it across the table to Bianca. The book was sturdy despite the aging. As she opened it, the smell of old musty pages wafted with each page turn. The first page read in infernal script, "The Way of the Fiend Hunter." Why is it written in infernal if it's intended to be used for hunting fiends? She looked at Rolius curiously. Bianca knew well that infernal is the language of the nine hells. She picked it up fairly well in her fiend studies. Often fiendkin naturally pick it up when exposed to it. Almost like a residual gift from their bloodline. Or curse, depending on who you ask. Rolius's eyes darkened. What better way to fight a monster than to know it inside and out? Use its own strengths against them. Bianca, this will elevate us to become the paramount hunters, the very bane of fiends. How so? Rolius moved closer as she flipped through the pages. A fiend hunter uses organic material to awaken the dormant nature living within them. For those who are not fiendkin, they must undergo multiple blood-altering elixirs. To even reach the point of being ready for fiendbane, the final alchemical brew to tap into that power. But fiendkin already have everything lurking in their blood. You have so much power, Bianca, as well as the knowledge to unlock it. You can make the fiendbane, and I can give you the materials to do so. I don't want to become a predator or more of a fiend. I want my soul back. Bianca tried to push the book away, but Rolius slammed her hand on it, keeping the tome right in front of Bianca. And how do you expect to do that? Exactly. You think fiend hunters alter their biology out of a desire to be like the demons and devils they hunt? It's a sacrifice, a necessary one to do good in this world. Bianca's thoughts linger on Rolius's words. Unless you finally get the courage to devote yourself to some higher power, like the mother, who can't even be bothered to intercede for those of us who have to live with the consequences of our family's choices? That's even if they accept you. How many fiendkin do you find here in the temple? Bianca closes her eyes, knowing the answer as Rolius continues. We both know it's not because we don't long for salvation, but what's the use of praying to a goddess that won't do anything to help our souls anyway? Bianca nervously picks at her nails, considering the words when Rolius takes Bianca's face in her hands. Rolius's eyes glisten as she speaks. I've been waiting for you. We can help each other. I feel that we are more alike than we know. Don't let fear hold you back any longer. After a moment, Bianca drops her head and says, All right. Okay. I'll do it. Bianca's alchemical storeroom was a sanctum of order amid the chaos of her conflicted life. Every vial and alembic was a soldier in rank, every herb and tincture a quiet ally in her quest for understanding. Yet now the space felt alien as she lay bound upon a cold, hard table, an unexpected battleground for her soul's fate. Rolius's presence was both a balm and a blade as she was meticulously preparing the instruments of their grim ritual. With a steady hand, she inserted the needles into Bianca's veins. This may sting, Rolius warned with a voice that harbored a tumult of urgency and compassion. But remember, this is for the greater good. You are strong enough. Bianca's heart pounded, but gave a faint nod of her head, a silent acquiescence to the path she'd chosen, when suddenly a visceral inferno raged through her. It was as if she bore the wrath of the 9 circles of hell within her very blood. The searing agony of Avernus's flames merged with Khania's merciless frost, forging a crucible of torment in her flesh. Her veins pulsed visibly, a grotesque dance of power surging beneath the skin. And within this crucible a dark yearning bloomed, a hunger for dominance, a thirst for the forbidden might that beckoned her. In the eye of her torment a vision unfolded, a desolate landscape, a realm of shadow and ash, an echo of the hells but unique in its desolation. Before her loomed a stone, and from it a sword beckoned. It reminded her of a scene from a Tarkirian legend, a narrative of might and magic. The wind howled, a tempestuous siren calling her to grasp the black blade that impaled the earth. Though Bianca was unsure of herself for most of her life, she had to be now. She reached for it, and her hand seared as it closed around the hilt, a brand of serpents intertwining marking her, a symbol unknown yet intimately desired. She yelled from the pain, gazing at the mark on her palm as it seeped into her skin. It may no longer be visible, but she knew it was there. With a defiant grip, she sought to claim the sword, but it was unyielding, steadfast as the rock that held it. Not deterred, she embraced the blade, her blood mingling with its essence. A cataclysmic burst shattered the silence as the blade fractured, its steel now a storm of crackling energy. The ensuing blast cast her back into the darkness, the hilt and a fragment of the blade her only spoils. In the void, fear consumed her. The presence loomed, a shadow of impending doom. In a frenzied defense, she swung the broken blade, and the shadow gave way to a familiar reality. The face of Rose Fisher, the town's investor and mayor, marred by a gash from Bianca's desperate strike. Confusion and horror gripped her as the sword dissipated into nothing, its remnant sinking into her flesh like a curse's final embrace. Darkness reclaimed her, and within its suffocating embrace her mind raced with questions. How had she been freed? Where was Rolius in this aftermath? And why, by all the divines, had she struck at Rose? A deluge of cold water startled her back to a grim sentience within the stone walls of a Summersrest cell. The whiplash of what she just experienced still rattled her. Breathing as if she had run for miles, she sat up in her cell. The harsh stone room was illuminated by 4 brilliant sconces. She was not alone. Her cellmates were a high elf, obscured in shadow, and 3 youths, their faces etched with the confusion and fear of the wrongly accused. A blonde-haired girl, a dragonkin of bronze scales, and a water primordial boy. All too young, all bearing the weight of a harsh world. Their eyes met, a silent inquiry passing between them. Bianca's heart ached, not only for her own lost path, but for these children, ensnared in the merciless gears of fate. As the cell's silence stretched, Bianca sat, her mind a whirl of chaos and regret, her only companion 3 young faces that mirrored her own bewildered sorrow.